יהיו יעזרו ללוחים יאמר חזק אוי 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 נשיר ביחד אוי 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 חזק אוי 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 נשיר ביחד אוי 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 חזק 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 ונשחק חזק 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 ונשחק חזק חזק אוי 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 ביאסטו ילו אוי 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 חזק אוי אוי ביאסטו ילו אוי 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 חזק 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 ונשחק חזק 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 ונשחק חזק חזק אוי 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 ביאסטו ילו אוי 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 חזק אוי אוי ביאסטו ילו אוי 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 חזק
Hazak, Hazak. Welcome, everybody. My name is Rabbi Shlomo Nachman, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining Ahuva and I today for our Sunday broadcast, which she tells me the volume is a little bit off on. So I'm trying to get that set up a little bit better, huh? No change at all, she says. Why would that be? Everything. That's better? Okay, I think we got it now. Oh, I see what the problem is. It was too far on DAW for what I was doing elsewise. This should be right now. All right, welcome again. We're always a little bit clumsy getting started here, but we are doing the best that we can. So, Baruch Hashem. So what we have begun doing is we have begun discussing the writings and reading and sharing the writings of Sholom Aleichem, one of the foremost Jewish writers, authors, thinkers, presenters, and all-around wonderful, wonderful Jew. We have a series of books here at the house. Most of them are excerpts of Sholom Aleichem. Some are, I think, maybe originals. But what we have found as we've been going through the material is there's just too much good stuff. So rather than sticking really strictly with the best of Sholom Aleichem, which we've been jumping around in anyway, today we're going to read to you two very special pieces from Sholom Aleichem's Old Country Tales. You don't need to go out and buy this book unless you want to build a Sholom Aleichem library. But we want to, as we're reading, we just fall in love with some of these pieces. And just sort of, it jumps out at us that this is the one to share today. So today we're going to share two. I'm going to be sharing this one. I'm going to be sharing one called Tevye Reads the Psalms. And then Ahuva is going to share one called, if I can get the pages to work right, called A Job as Easy as Pie. So we're going to start the week with a piece of pie. Just kidding. But thank you for joining us. The copyrights are always preserved by the owner, the translator, and such. This particular book is selected and translated by someone named Kurt Leviant. We make absolutely no claims to anyone's copyrighted material, obviously. We are, however, using them in terms of the fair use policy as exists in the copyright laws of the United States government. For more information on the copyright laws, I invite you to go to my website, look under classes and broadcasts, and you will find the disclaimer there explaining the copyright law as it applies to us. We do this for Jewish education and for the purposes of promoting peace and mutual understanding among all people. This material, therefore, is being legally used under the copyright laws. Hi.
Hello. Is my mic working, hopefully?
I certainly hope so. If anybody is having an issue hearing either one of us, would you please let us know on the chat screen before we get started? I think we're both okay.
And if our levels are not pretty close to even, let us know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's some things I can adjust here on my sound box. There's some things I can't, but we want you to be able to hear us without having your ears bleed or without you having to crank it up 100% and squinting your ears, I guess you'd say, to listen. If someone on the chat screen would be so kind. Thank you. Susan says you're both good. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. So Let's go ahead and begin on page 27 of Sholom Aleichem, A Treasury of Stories by the Master of Yiddish Humor, Old Country Tales, selected and translated again by Kurt Leviant. Tevye reads the Psalms. No doubt you remember, Mr. Sholom Aleichem, that I once gave you a rundown of the weekly biblical portion, Get Thee Out, and supplemented it with about 36 commentaries. I told you how Esau, the peasant that is, squared his accounts with his brother Jacob, me, and how he revenged the sale of that ancient birthright by driving Jacob out of town, bag and baggage, kith and kin, and betting too, as was only right and proper to do. They put the rack and ruin all of my belongings, demolished my entire little shred of poverty, and even did in my poor horse, a mare, mention of whom still brings tears to my eyes. After all, on Tisha B'Av we read in Lamentations, for all these things I weep. So surely the poor creature deserves a tear. But never mind that. I'm willing to forget the whole thing, because if you really think about it, it's really just the same old story. Am I a more privileged character in the eyes of God than the rest of my brethren, whom the peasants are booting out of their sacred villages and cutting off, rooting up, routing out, and moving down every place where there's even a hint of a Jew? Like the prayer says, be mindful of us. They're mindful that not a trace of us should remain. Ah, me. But what should I complain to God about? Look at all the other exiled village Jews who are straying like stray sheep, wandering up and down God's creation with their wives and their little ones. They don't know where they'll bed down for the night. They don't have a place to lay their heads. And they're perpetually in a quiver, lest they should see in the distance the gleam of a constable's button, or any like approaching plague. It's just like the good book says. The Lord will set a people against thee. The peasant, of course. But Tevye is no ignoramus. No. Unlike the other village Jews, Tevye understands the Psalms, the Tehillim. He's no stranger to Midrash, nor to the Pentateuch with Rashi's commentary. But what of it? Expect the peasant to be set store by all of this, as is only right and proper, and take his cap off for such a Jew, or give me a big thank you. And yet, when you come right down to it, it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's certainly no drawback. I mean, that like other decent folks, I'm not blind to the little letters, thanks God. I get a meaning of a biblical verse. I can find my way in and out of the text. As the Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot says, know how to reply. In other words, you're in good shape if you have all the answers. Do you think, Mr. Sholom Aleichem, that I'm just pulling all of this out of my sleeve? Or that I want to give myself a pat on the back for my great knowledge and learning? Pardon me, but that could be said only by someone who doesn't know Tevye. Tevye is not in the habit of talking through his hat, and, as you well know, he's never been a common braggart. Tevye only likes to talk about things that he himself has seen. That is, something he personally has experienced. If you'll just sit down here for a little while, Mr. Sholom Aleichem, you'll hear a fine story. You'll learn how handy it is for a man not to just be a dumb hunk of flesh and fowl, but to actually have an inkling into the higher realms, and to know how to spice his talk with biblical verses, even though they're only from our ancient book of Tehillim. So, to make a long story short, if memory serves me, this happened quite some time ago, ages ago, I'm afraid, during the days of the Revolution and the Constitution, when, with free spirit and unfettered hands, the peasant mobs tore loose over Jewish towns and villages and made a point of wrecking all the Jewish properties. Now, do recall that this is happening in Tsarist Russia around the time of the Russian Revolution. That's the revolution he's referring to here. So if you wanted to put it in a historic, not historic, but if you wanted to put it in a context of the movie Fiddler on the Roof, this happened after they left Anatevia, or around that same time. Continuing. Just like the prayer book says, he smashes the foe and he humbles the arrogant. In other words, he smashes windows and he tears up feather beds. I think I've already told you that such things really don't surprise me. They don't even scare me because I feel it's simply a case of either or. If it is destined, decreed from on high, who am I to be an exception among all the Jews? After all, we read in the Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Father, all of Israel has a share in the pogroms, of course. But on the other hand, perhaps all of this is a quick epidemic, heaven help us, a passing tornado, so surely there's no reason to lose heart. This storm will blow itself out. The skies will again brighten, and the little prayer book has it, renew our days as of old. In other words, the good old times will come again. But like the saying goes, once a peasant, always a peasant. How true that is. The entire mob trampled in from the village, as I once told you, I believe, and brought me glad tidings. They'd come to me with what they were going to do to all the other Jews. That is, they'd come to fulfill the sacred prescript of smite the Jew. So, right off, I naturally let fly a round of abuse. I pleaded and I asked questions that as only Tevye can. Could it really be? How and why and wherefore? And again, what sort of mean trick was this to pounce upon a man, said I, in the middle of the day, to rip the feathers out of his pillows? Oi! But nothing doing. Plead till you turn blue in the face. I saw that I was wasting my time. These were a stubborn bunch as mules, that gang of peasants. They just had to do it, they said, for the sake of appearances. They had to satisfy their authorities. They were afraid, they said, lest some official or some other minor plague should happen to them. That's why the local gang wanted to show the authorities that here they were no different. That they weren't the sort who would skip a Jew, just like that, without a hint of a pogrom. For otherwise, they wouldn't be able to look the authorities straight in the eye. Therefore, they said the local gang decided that they would have to do something to me. They just had to. Then, at that very last moment, Tevye got an idea. Know what? I told them. If the local gang has so decreed that there's nothing more to say, after all, what can be higher than a local gang? And yet, when you get to thinking about it, the way things actually are, even higher, there is something even higher than the local gang. Well, tell us then, what could be higher than the local gang? God, I said. I didn't mean my God. I didn't mean your God. I mean our God and the God of our forefathers. In other words, the God over all of us. The one who created me and created you. And, forgive the proximity, your entire local gang. That's who I mean. So, who will have to turn to find out? If he's ordered you to harm me, conceivably that's exactly what he wants. But on the other hand, chances are just as good that he absolutely disapproves of what you're doing. So how do we find out? How about if we cast lots? Now, look, here's a copy of God's own book, the Book of Psalms. You all know that book. We call it Tehillim, or Psalms. You could call it a Psalter. That's what the church calls it. And this holy Psalter will be our judge, our justice of the peace, so to speak. This book, then, will decide whether you're to beat me or not. Open-mouthed, they exchange glances. And then Ivan Poparil the village chief, stepped forward and said, "Would you mind telling us exactly how the Holy Psalter will decide for us?" "Yes, yes, yes, if you will give me your word of honor, Ivan," said I, "and shake hands with the gang that you will all abide by the Psalter's decision, then I'll show you how this can be done." So Ivan scratched his head and said, "A promise is a promise." "In that case, fine and dandy," I said. "Now, I'll open the page in the psalm at random, and the first word that I see, I'll read out. All you have to do is take the trouble of repeating that word after me. If any one of you is standing here will be able to pronounce the word I hit upon, it will be a heavenly sign that you are ordained to do with Tevye as you see fit. But if you cannot pronounce the word, why, then it's a sign from God that he forbids you to harm Tevye. Agreed?" Ivan, the village chief, exchanged glances with the gang and said, "All right." "That's fair and square," I said, opening the book of Tehillim before them. "All right. Now, here's the word. Cataracts. Let's see if you can pronounce this word. Cataracts." They looked at one another and then at me and asked me to repeat the words. "I'll go along with that. I'll even repeat it 3 times. Cataracts, cataracts, cataracts." "No, Tevye, don't say ka-ka-ka," they said. "Just say it plain, slow and clear." "Agreed. I'll say it for you slow and clear. Cataracts. Happy now?" So the mob thought for a while and then set to work, each one according to his own ability. One said, "Cat's attack." Another one muttered, "Cats and rack." And the third kept repeating, "Catch a rat, catch a rat." Now, why did he say that? Was he perhaps thinking of Naphtali Gershom, the limper's cat, who once had caught a rat in his house in Anatevia? "You know what follows," I said, seeing that this could go on forever. I see that the job is not easier said than done. It seems to me that cataracts is too tough a nut for you to crack. So I'll give you another word, also taken out of the book of Tehillim. Here's one. Indignation. Once more, the same merry-go-round began. One of them said, "In the station?" Another exclaimed, "Dig your nation?" And a third spat out, "Confound it, constipation! The devil take you!" In brief, they apparently realized that they were getting nowhere near Tevye's word. So the village chief, Ivan, upped and said, "Here's the long and the short of it, Tevel. We don't have anything against you personally. You're a Yid, it's true, but you're not a bad sort of Yid. For one thing, it's got nothing to do with the other. But we have to beat you up anyway. That's what our local gang has decided. So we'll just have to smash a few of your windows. If worse comes to worse, you can smash the windows yourself, just to shut them up and to damn their hides. For if by chance the authorities were to pass by, they could see for themselves that we haven't passed you up. Otherwise, we're liable to get into hot water on account of you. And now, Tevel, they call Tevye Tevel, heat up the samovar and treat us to some tea, and of course to half a jug of whiskey for the gang. We'll each have a shot and drink to your health, for you're a clever Jew, one of God's own people, no doubt. As I live and breathe, these were his very words, just as I'm repeating them to you now, so God help me. Well, now I asked you, Mr. Sholom Aleichem, for after all, you're a Jewish writer. Isn't Tevye right when he says that we've got a great God, and that as long as a man's alive, he mustn't give in to despair, especially if he's a Jew, and especially a Jew who's no stranger to our good friends, the little letters in small print, the holy text. For when you get down to it, it's just like it says in the prayer, happy are those who dwell. In other words, happy are they who dwell among the books and know a thing or two. And no matter how much we rack our brains And no matter how much we attempt Hiflatuten, explanations, we have people in this world, like the prophet says, who is like Israel? The people, a nation on earth. In other words, there's no comparison. A Gentile is a Gentile. And a Jew, after all, is a Jew. And like you yourself say in your stories, you've got to be born a Jew. Happy are you, O Israel. In other words, I'm lucky I was born Jewish, so that I could know the taste of exile and the trampling along all over the globe among all the nations. Like the Torah says, they journeyed and then they encamped. In other words, one day here, the next day there, forever. Since I got the true meaning of the weekly biblical portion, get thee out, knocked into me, remember that long story I once told you? I've been constantly on the move. I haven't found a single place where I can stop and say, hey, here, Tevye is where he'll settle without cares. But Tevye asks no questions. And if he's told to move on, Tevye moves on. Today we met on the train, Mr. Sholom Aleichem. Tomorrow this same train may take us to Yehupitz. A year later it might take us to Odessa, Warsaw, perhaps even to America. Unless, of course, the Almighty takes a good look around and suddenly decides, you know what, children? I think it's high time for the Messiah. Oh, how I wish he'd pulled that nasty little trick on us, that ancient God of ours. But meanwhile, live and be well. Have a good trip, Mr. Aleichem, and send my best to our fellow Jews. Tell them not to worry, for our ancient God still lives. That is a powerful, powerful tale. Quite wonderful, I think. Ahuva will now read our second tale. And then after she reads the second tale, we will go into a time of open conversation and chat where I will invite any questions that you may have, any comments and that sort of thing. Ahuva.
Sholom Aleichem wrote about Tevye throughout his lifetime. Both Tevye's lifetime and Sholom Aleichem's. The one that Shlomo just read was one of the latter tales told. Model, the cantor's son, is another one of his favorite characters, and this is one of his earlier works. And please excuse my throat. It's better than last week. It's not quite there yet. A job as easy as pie. Which, by the way, well, I was going to tell you what book this one is initially from, but can't do it, so. Mama just told me a good piece of news. I've got a job. And not at a plain workingman's shop either, God forbid. Mama said her enemies won't live to see the day when Model, the son of the late Pacey the cantor, becomes a common workingman. My job, she said, was simply grand and as easy as pie. All day long, I'd be in school, that is, in the Talmud Torah, and at night, I'd sleep over at Old Man Lurie's house. Old Man Lurie is a wealthy man, Mama said. The only trouble is he is not a healthy man. I mean, generally he feels quite well. He eats and drinks and sleeps, except at night. That's when he can't sleep a wink. Lies awake all night long. So his children are afraid of leaving him alone at night. They just need another human being in the room with him. Even a youngster would do as long as he's human. Putting another old man into the room didn't seem proper, but a child doesn't matter. It's like having a little cat around. They're offering you 5 rubles per week and supper when you get back from Talmud Torah. And supper's going to be first class, as befits a rich house. What they throw away there would be enough for all of us. Now, off to school, Model, and when you come home this evening, I'll bring you over to Old Man Lurie's. You won't have to do a bit of work. You'll have a royal dinner and a fine place to sleep. Plus 5 rubles a week. That will buy you some new clothes and a pair of boots. Sounds good, huh? So why the tears? But with Mama, it can't be helped. She's simply got to have a good cry. At Talmud Torah, I only take up space. I don't learn a thing. There's no grade for my age level, so I help the teacher's wife around the house and play with the pussycat, working for the teacher's wife isn't hard at all. I sweep the house and bring in the firewood and do anything she tells me to do. It's a snap. Can't even call it work, really, just so long as I don't have to study. Studying, there's nothing worse. But best of all is the pussycat. People say a cat's an unclean beast. I say that's a lie. A cat's a clean animal. People say a cat's a mischievous little devil. I say that's a lie, too. A cat's a kind, cuddly creature. A dog is a tail-wagging cringer. A cat plays up to you. When you pat her head, she shuts her eyes and begins to purr. I love cats, but so what? Talk to my pals, and they'll tell you thousands of fairy tales. That when you touch a cat, you have to wash your hands. That touching a cat affects your memory. They don't know what else to dream up. They've got a funny habit. If a cat comes up to them, they give it a swift kick in the ribs. Me, I can't bear to see a cat beaten, but my friends laugh at me. They don't feel sorry for animals at all. I'm talking about kids who go to Talmud Torah with me. They're a bunch of murderers. They make fun of me on account of my stiff, coarse pants. They call me wooden pantaloony. And my mother, Mrs. Sniffles, 'cause she's always crying. "Here comes your mom, Mrs. Sniffles," they yelled. She'd come to call for me and take me to my job, a job as easy as pie. On the way, Mama complained about her sad and bitter lot. Sad alone just wasn't enough. God had given her 2 children, but now she was widowed and alone. "Knock wood," she said. "At least your brother Eli made a good marriage. He fell into a bed of clover. The only trouble is that father-in-law is a bore." Ah, me, a baker. Alas, what else can you expect from a baker? Mama complained as we made our way to the Lurie house. "Old Man Lurie's room is like a royal palace," Mama whispered, which was just the place I was dying to see. But meanwhile, we were still in the kitchen, Mama and I, but the kitchen wasn't half bad either. The oven was gleaming and white, and the pot shone, and everything sparkled. We were asked to be seated. A lady appeared dressed like a rich noblewoman, and she talked to Mama and pointed at me. Mama nodded in agreement, continually wiping her lips, and refused to sit down. But me, I took a seat. As Mama was leaving, she told me, "Mind your manners," and "Be a good boy," and she managed to sniffle a bit and wipe her eyes. Tomorrow, she would call for me and take me to school. They gave me supper, soup and white loaf. Imagine, white bread in the middle of the week. And meat, heaps of it. After supper, they told me to go upstairs. Since I didn't know what they meant by upstairs, Kana, the cook, a swarthy woman with a long nose, took me by the hand and showed me. I followed her. It was a pleasure to walk barefoot up the carpeted steps. It wasn't quite dark yet, but already the lamps were lit. Dozens of them. There were all sorts of designs and pictures pasted on the walls, and the chairs were covered with leather. Even the ceiling was painted like, forgive the comparison, the one in the synagogue. Even nicer. I was brought into a large room. It was so huge that had I been alone, I would have raced from one wall to the other, or even rolled around on the velvet quilt spread over the entire floor. Turning somersaults on such a quilt must be loads of fun. Even sleeping on it wouldn't be half bad either. Old Man Lurie was a tall, handsome man with a gray beard and a broad forehead. He wore a kippah made of pure velvet, and his slippers, stitched in heavy thread, were of velvet too. He sat poring over a huge, thick book. He didn't say a word as he studied, but merely chewed on the tip of his beard, jiggling his leg and grumbling softly to himself. Old Man Lurie was a queer duck. I stared at him and I asked myself, well, does he see me or doesn't he? And apparently he didn't see me, for he didn't even look my way, and no one said anything to him about me. They just placed me in the room and locked the door behind me. Suddenly, Old Man Lurie, still not looking at me, began to speak. "Come here, sir, and I will show you what Rambam has to say." Who was he addressing? Me? calling me sir? I looked around. There was nobody else in the room. Come here, sir, Old Man Lurie bellowed once again in his gruff voice, and you'll see what Rambam says. By now I was afraid to approach. Are you calling me? Yes, you, sir. Who else? Said Old Man Lurie, gazing into the book. He took me by the hand and pointed out the passage and explained what Rambam had to say. As he proceeded, his voice grew shriller, and he became increasingly wrought up. Finally, he worked himself into such a dither that he turned beet red. He kept gesticulating with his thumb and frequently treated me to an elbow jab in the ribs. Well, sir, what do you say to that? That was good, huh? Even if it were top-notch, I couldn't make head or tails out of it, so I kept quiet. I was silent, and he seethed. He seethed, and I was silent, and then I heard the jangle of keys on the other side of the door. The door opened, and in came the lady dressed like a rich noblewoman. She approached Old Man Lurie and shouted right into his ear. Apparently he was deaf. If not, why did she have to shout? She told him, "Leave me alone. It was time for me to go to sleep." And she took me away from the old man and bedded me down on a cot with springs. The linen was white as snow. The silken quilt was soft. I was in paradise. The nobly dressed lady covered me and left the room, locking the door. Hands behind his back, Old Man Lurie began pacing in the room, looking down at his fine slippers. He muttered and grumbled to himself, moving his eyebrows most peculiarly. But I was so drowsy I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. Suddenly, Old Man Lurie came up to me and said, "You know what? I'm going to eat you up." I stared at him. I didn't know what he was driving at. "Get up. I'm going to eat you up." "Who, me?" "Yes, you. I have to eat you up, and no ifs or buts about it." Old Man Lurie kept talking and pacing in the room with his head down and his hands at his side and his forehead wrinkled. But little by little he lowered his voice, and soon he was whispering to himself. I followed every word, scarcely able to catch my breath. He asked himself questions and then answered them. Rambam states the universe is not eternal. How is that inferred? By the fact that every effect must have a cause. How can I demonstrate this? By asserting my own will. How? If I want to eat him up, I eat him up. But what about compassion? Compassion has nothing to do with it. I assert my will. The will is the ultimate purpose. I eat him up. I want to eat him up. I must eat him up. That Old Man Lurie certainly brought me a fine piece of news. He must eat me up. What would Mama say? Suddenly I became scared and a shiver ran over me. The cot I was lying on was not quite up to the wall. Little by little, I moved closer to the wall and slipped to the floor. My teeth began to chatter, and I listened, waiting for him to come and eat me up. How did I pass the time? I quietly called to Mama and felt the wet drops rolling down my cheeks into my mouth. The drops were salty. Never before did I long for Mama as I did then, and I also longed for my brother Eli, but not that much. And I also recalled my father, after whom I'm saying the mourner's prayer. Who would say Kaddish after me if Old Man Lurie gobbled me up? Apparently, I had fallen asleep. For when I suddenly woke up, I looked around, anxious to know where I was. I touched the wall and the cot, and I raised my head, and I saw a huge, bright room. Velvet quilts were on the floor. Pictures were pasted on the walls, and the ceiling like, forgive the comparison, the one in the synagogue. Old Man Lurie was still sitting over the huge book, which he called Rambam. I liked the name Rambam because it sounded a lot like Bim Bam. Suddenly I recalled that last night Old Man Lurie had wanted to eat me up. I was afraid if he saw me, he'd try that same trick again. So once more I hid between the cot and the wall and remained absolutely still. The door opened with a clatter. The nobly dressed lady entered, followed by Kana carrying a big tray filled with pitchers of coffee and hot milk and a platter of freshly baked butter rolls. "Where's the lad?" said Kana. She looked around and spotted me in my hiding place. "You're some little devil, aren't you? What are you doing down there? Come down to the kitchen with me. Your mother's waiting for you." I jumped up and dashed barefoot down the padded steps, singing rhythmically, "Ram-bom, bim-bom, bim-bom, ram-bom," until I ran into the kitchen. "What's the rush?" Kana said to Mama. "Let him at least have a sip of coffee and a butter roll. You ought to have a cup of coffee. It's no skin off their back. They've got plenty." Mama thanked her and sat down, and Kana served coffee and fresh butter rolls. "Did you ever eat sugar cakes made with fresh eggs? Well, that's what the rich man's butter rolls taste like. They're even better than cake. I can't even begin to describe the taste of the coffee. It was sheer delight." Mama held the cup and sipped the coffee, enjoying every drop. She gave me most of her butter roll, and seeing this, Kana raised a fuss as though we had insulted her. "What are you doing? Eat, eat, there's plenty." Kana gave me another butter roll. That made 2.5. I listened to their conversation, one I was already familiar with. Mama complained about her bad fortune. A widow left with 2 children, one in bed of clover, the other, poor fellow, not. I would like to know just what a bed of clover really is. Is it a bed filled with clover leaves, always green and grassy? Kana listened to Mama and shook her head. Then Kana began to talk and complain about her bad fortune. She stemmed from a fine, respectable family, yet now she had to cater to others. Her father had been a well-to-do householder, but a fire ruined him, and then he fell sick, and after that he died. If her father were to get up and see his Kana standing in front of someone else's oven? But thank God she had no cause for complaint. She had a good job. The only trouble was the old man was a bit what? I didn't know. Kana made little circles around her ears with her finger. Mama listened to Kana and shook her head. And then Mama began to talk again. Now Kana listened and shook her head. As we left, Kana gave me another butter roll, and I showed it to the kids in Talmud Torah. And they crowded around me, gaping at me as I ate it. Apparently, it was a rare delicacy for them. I gave each of them a little piece. They licked their fingers. "Where'd you get a treat like that?" I puffed out both of my cheeks, and I stood before them with my hands deep in my pockets of my stiff, coarse pants. I chewed slowly and did a silent little jig with my bare feet, as though to say, "You poor beggars, some treat butter rolls. Ha ha, you ought to try it with coffee, and then you'll know what paradise is really like."
Thank you, Ahuva, for reading as always. Wonderful, wonderful stories by Rabbi or Mr. Sholom Aleichem.
Mark those so we know we read them. I'm distracting you.
No, I'm just waiting to get the book because I want to be able to share again who did this. So these 2 readings were from Sholom Aleichem, A Treasury of Stories. Sorry about that. So these 2 stories that we've shared this morning were Sholom Aleichem, A Treasury of Stories of the Master Yiddish Humor, Old Country Tales, selected and translated by Kurt Leviant. And again, all copyrights and everything else remain with the author.
And I'd also like to thank whoever at our local synagogue, B'nai Zion, made the decision to pass these books along to people that would appreciate them instead of doing whatever else they might have done with them. I am truly glad that we have them.
Me too. I had heard that they were giving away books, and Ahuva was at the synagogue and came home with some books and told me. So I immediately jumped into the van and drove up to the synagogue, and anything by Sholom Aleichem that I saw is now in our house here. So we are quite happy about that. We have a lot of his books. All right. Thank you, Ahuva.
Adios. And shalom.
All righty. Ahuva's going to move the camera a little bit that way. There you go. And right there's perfect. Excellente. Thank you, ma'am. So, if we have any questions or comments about what we read or really about anything else, this would be a wonderful time for it. Scrolling back up here, I don't think I missed any comments except that Guy said, I think it was the part when they were talking about the pants that he was wearing. Guy said, remember as a kid wearing corduroy pants in the winter to grade school and the kids would laugh. But he said, hey, I was warm. That's the right attitude, Guy. Funny how you hear something that reminds you of something else. Absolutely. All the time. Yep. Our friend Muhammad Kamal asked how old he is. Guy says he's 50. 56, Guy, you're still a baby. You're 56, man. You're still in diapers. Spring chicken compared to us old people. That's human years, however, dogs. I don't count, laugh out loud. All righty. So, as we do on all of our broadcasts, really, after the primary presentation, which in this case is these two stories by Mr. Aleichem, we are open to any conversation, any question, any comment that you would like. We're going to leave this pretty much open for your discretion within reason. If it does go to a point that I'm not comfortable with, I will call a halt to it. But pretty much we're open to anything that you might want to talk about. I would like to remind everybody while I'm waiting for comments to show up on the chat screen that our Thursday evening group, our Noahide group, One God, Seven Laws, I had for a while sort of let it coast by a little bit, you might say. Didn't really do that much with it. But because of certain events that happened, I decided to get more serious with it. I'm currently working on another Noahide study that will, I think, be very good as far as defining what a Noahide is and what a Noahide is not. And that should be on my website pretty soon. I want to present that to the Noahide group. However, we're currently in the middle of a series with the Noahide group, so I haven't quite decided yet if I'm going to maybe present it as a live thing on another time. I might do it on a Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. But it is going to be, I think, a pretty interesting study concerning what Noahides are. I mention that, as I say, largely because I'm just giving you guys a chance to post to the chat screen to help carry on the conversation. Shoshi says, when I wore corduroy pants to school, so did everyone else. It was the fashion then, older than you, obviously. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Corduroy, if you had real corduroy, that was actually pretty cool when I was growing up. I had a corduroy jacket that I absolutely loved, and I thought that was just the coolest thing. Fashions change and that sort of thing. Everything's always changing. The only thing that remains the same is change, except for Torah. Torah always remains the same, although our understandings of it does vary. Let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and give you some upcoming highlights of what we're doing, and I do encourage you again to post your comments or questions that we might be discussing this time. I hope, by the way, that none of you got confused over the broadcast schedule. For some reason, apparently, I don't know, maybe I did it wrong. I certainly didn't think I did, but YouTube was under the impression that today's broadcast was going to be tomorrow, and I don't know why that happened. But I would like to ask all of you, each one of you, to join and to subscribe to my new YouTube channel. It is on the screen right now if you have not yet signed up. Actually, I should have removed the Ask Subscriber, but I don't think that's going to matter. But I would like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Actually, I bet it will matter. Ignore the one that I just posted. Let's see if I can remove that. I can. Okay, I can remove that one. And then take off the little ending bit. There you go. That should be it there. I need 100 subscribers to be able to get a custom URL name. The custom URL that I will be getting would be the account name, which is Learn Emunah. Currently, I have 42 subscribers, so I'm almost halfway to the 100 that I need for the live broadcast. And if you would be so kind, if you have not yet signed up to do so, I would appreciate it. And remember, if you have more than one YouTube account, you can also sign up on every account to my page, which will make it so that I can say, go to youtube.com/learnemunah. Much, much better than all of these letters and number combinations that you have until you get to 100 subscribers. So I would appreciate that. Rabbi Aaron Nachman, a while back, had a Seven Beggars YouTube account and changed over to the Karuv Media Network one. What we are currently working on is a way to merge Karuv Media Network with Learn Emunah so that we can be live on both channels, and also we're going to be signing up with some other incredible Torah teachers on the Karuv Media Network. The goal is that anytime you want Torah teaching, you can tune in, and you will probably find a live presenter 24/6, or you can find lots of recorded messages by solid people. There's a few channels like this already on the internet. Some of those channels have teachers that we don't personally get behind. So we're trying to present this for people who agree with our basic perspective, who'll be able to find like-minded rabbis sharing Torah truth. So that's what we're trying to do. No, that's what we are doing with the Karuv Media Network, and we appreciate your involvement. If you haven't yet signed up for the Karuv Media Network, I would also like to invite you to do that. And here is, in just a moment, here is the link to the Karuv Media Network as well. I would encourage you to be a member of both of these two YouTube channels for good information. Let's see, looking back up here a little bit now. Shoshi says that her Shlomo is in the basement sewing corduroy kippot right now. And I think we're all excited to see the creations that Shlomo is currently doing. Stephen Ewing says, since there are no questions at the moment, I will ask a random one. Trying to figure out why eggs are not prohibited with chicken. Sorry for the randomness. Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. We have in Hanukkah, as we discussed last Thursday in the Noahide group, as Jews, we have a commandment not to mix milk and dairy, meat and dairy. That law is based on a rather non-specific law of Torah, which says that we are prohibited from cooking cooking a kid in its mother's milk. The rabbis, such as Rashi and others, as I discussed in that broadcast, did a lot of research into what the word kid means and determined that even though kid, as it's usually translated, means a goat, the word kid should be applied to goats, any kind of cow meat, any kind of young kosher, any kind of young clean animal that you might eat would be considered, like a mammal, would be considered a kid in that context. So the question came, why can't you cook a kid in its mother's milk? And the rabbis came up with a few different answers, as we have a habit of doing. The answer that I think is historically the most accurate is that we know that there were people who used to, because they didn't have refrigeration and that sort of thing. So you would take your goat or whatever kosher animal, I suppose. Well, not necessarily kosher if you're a pagan, but whatever animal you're going to eat, mammal. You might take it and cut off a leg, and then with a hot iron sear it so you stop the bleeding, and then cook the leg, and everybody sits around and has meat. And then a few days later, you might take another leg, and you do the same thing. And you might take a knife and cut out from the animal's side. And, I don't know to what degree they did this, but I know for a fact historically that they did do this. This is extreme animal cruelty. Extreme animal cruelty. Torah forbids that. I think that honestly is the primary reference to the ruling about not cooking a kid in its mother's milk. As we were discussing, every law of halakha that you're going to find has with it justice and mercy and compassion. One of the 7 Noahide laws, for instance, forbids us from harming animals, which was the context here. So I think that was the reference, frankly. However, if you think about it, milk gives life. Humans, animals, milk is what nurtures infants. We are the only ones that continue drinking milk after infancy. But that is the nature of milk, is to bring life. Death is what we get through meat. Something has to die for you to eat meat. By keeping meat and milk separate, we are saying there should be no bringing apart together of death and life. Same would also apply for abortion, incidentally. You do not kill. You have to have a separation between meat and dairy, because you have a separation between death and life. And Torah says, choose life that you may live. In the case of a chicken, we do actually have some rules about chickens. For instance, we're not supposed to eat fertilized eggs. If you crack your egg and you find that has taken place, you should give the egg to your animals or something. You should not eat it yourself. So we do have a slightly similar attitude towards chickens and their eggs and other birds and their eggs, but not to the same degree. It was ruled by rabbis that if someone saw you eating chicken and having milk, whether that was a glass of milk or some kind of milk sauce with it, an average bystander, it might look to them as though you were having meat and milk or goat and milk. And so to avoid that appearance, the rabbis rule that we cannot have milk with chicken either. We can, however, have milk with fish, because no one seeing you eat fish is going to think that that is a mammal. So some of the laws that we have seem rather odd, but they honestly do have an intelligent foundation behind them. They do have a rational answer behind them. The whole thing is to make it very clear that we are wanting to honor Hashem in what we eat, drink, and in what we do. The kashrut laws concerning chickens and other fowls are far less stringent than those of meat. For meat, you really are supposed to have a shechter who has the proper knife, which was, by the way, invented by the Baal Shem Tov, to slaughter the animal and to make sure that you're leaving out that vein and all these specific things. That you don't have these issues with chicken either. So that would be the basic answer. I'm not sure if that quite clarifies it. But that would be the basic answer. And thank you, because, like I said, I'm open to any questions for the next hour or so. So that's a very good question. Anyone that raises chickens can go out in their backyard and slaughter their own chicken, halakhically. There are certain essential principles of cleanliness and that type of thing, but you don't necessarily have to have a shechter to do your chicken. Chickens come under a different category than cows and goats and that sort of thing. So it was an excellent question. Susan says eggs are not dairy. Where'd it go? This thing jumps. Where did she say that? Because I just saw the first part of it. There we go. Susan Connor said, eggs are not dairy. Only milk products are prohibited with meat. Right. And so that's what I was trying to say. That was a rather long answer, I acknowledge. But the question, though, Susan, I think that he was sort of getting at, which is valid, which is that the law is a kid in its mother's milk. So it's a baby. Eggs have the baby chicks. And that, I think, would be more the question rather than simply the mixture of meat and dairy. It would be the kid and the mother. But that is why, and we do have halakha about not eating fertilized eggs. Shoji says podcasts are coming. Yay. Shlomo is working on some great plans to help us get our message out in a more broad sense. We're going to have to figure out some technical things, but Shlomo is taking classes and he's on top of it. So I look forward to talking to Shlomo privately about that. Stephen says, your broadcast happened to be in the middle of me looking into this topic. No, I got you. It's a totally legitimate question. I think that's the basic point. Like Susan says, eggs are not dairy, so it would not apply to those laws. And we are supposed to avoid eating the baby chicks with their mothers, or the fertilized eggs with their mothers. But the question with dairy with this to me was always that you cannot milk a chicken. So why can't we have milk with chicken? But that is the standard answer because it might look like we were doing something that we're not. Appearances are important, and so is the intention behind it. Stephen said, okay, I read that. Muhammad Kamel says, works for, by the way, M. Kamel, do you want me to call you M or should I use your name, Muhammad? You're fine with us, but let me know what you want me to call you on the broadcast. But M. Kamel says, works for me. I just want to tell you that I don't appear to the Noahide broadcast due to time. Oh, I got you on that one completely. That's the reason that I do most of my broadcast in the daytime is twofold. Most of my broadcasts are at noon. The original reason, honestly, was that Rabbi A does a broadcast on Monday nights and Wednesday nights. And I had already set up a Wednesday night broadcast for the Noahides, which I moved to Thursday night. But I don't want anyone to have to ever choose between my broadcast and Rabbi A's. The other reason was because if you live in Africa, if you live in the Middle East, in many different places, when it's 8 p.m. here, it's like god-awful early there, and depending on exactly where you live at. So you can always watch our broadcast on our YouTube channel. And so you don't have to miss a single broadcast if you would like to follow the broadcast. But it does seem to work pretty good. Susan, Shlomo Randalls and me and Rabbi A have been discussing ways to further what we're doing here. We are looking at the possibility of taking the first hour, and we haven't worked out the details yet, but taking the first hour of the broadcast when I'm normally studying a book or something like that, and separating that from the second hour plus so that we would have an hour podcast, and then the podcast would end and people could still hang out for our conversation after the broadcast. And then those broadcasts would be put on the various podcast servers to be spread around to a lot of other people. We are still in the process of figuring this out. Shlomo has some great plans and is going to be trying out some of the things that he's learning on Rabbi A for the House of Seven Beggars broadcast and also for mylearnamunah.com broadcast. So we're working together on this. We'll be announcing these things as we get closer, which servers we're going to be on and that sort of thing. I did podcasts for about close to a year on one podcast server, and I got one response in the whole time, so I quit doing it. But Shlomo knows what he's doing. So this should be really good for us. We're trying to get the message out wider and wider, which is why Donald Willinger is always encouraging everybody, and I keep forgetting to please share this with your friends. We're doing a lot of work here putting these things together, and we really do want to get the message out to people as broadly as we can. And Shlomo is helping us and is studying ways to make this more effective to get the message out. We will be announcing these things as we start moving forward. Guy says I could wear one. I get Shoshi if I could. Oh, I see. Steve, I don't know if Stone was planning on selling them or not. I know he's going to be donating them to a few members of the house that he knows, but I'm not really sure if he's going to be making enough to be selling them or exactly what his plans are for those. Perhaps when he gets a bunch of them made, he'll give us some idea. Stephen Ewing says, yes, but chicken is prohibited with dairy, but not eggs. What makes eggs parve? Yeah, well, that's the point. And this is Susan says, where's the milk? The whole thing there has to do with meat and dairy, Stephen. That really is the issue. and eggs do not count. Well, they're not only do they not count, they're not dairy. And so we have different rules concerning meat and eggs. You can, for instance, you can have beef with eggs if you want to. You can have, eggs are a totally different category than milk, as Susan is saying. Keeps jumping. Where is the chicken in the egg? It is a chicken egg. And Susan answers this perfectly. If there is a blood spot in the egg, it is rendered not kosher because this represents life. Most eggs we buy now are infertile chicken that cannot be fertilized. If you were living on a kosher farm back in the days of Sholom Aleichem, you would always take your eggs. It's called candling. You would have a candle, and you would take your egg and put it in front of the candle, looking through the egg. You can actually see the glow, and you can actually see these spots that she's talking about. And you were very careful to keep your rooster away from the hens, and only put them together when you wanted to mate them. Because as Susan correctly says, if there's a blood spot in the egg, it's the beginning of fertilization, and that renders it to be not kosher. So when you open up your egg, if you are keeping kosher, you look first to make sure that you don't have that blood spot in the egg. And as Susan correctly says, most eggs that you're going to buy in, really I think most of the Western world, are not going to be fertilized. Because it does not do any good for the egg producers to produce in that fashion. So, people who are really careful with kashrut, they do still check every egg that they crack open. I guess what confused me is that what I read is to check the fertilized status of an egg. You must incubate several days, then use light. Correct temperature is needed for all this. Yeah, but see, that is, again, if you were living in the times of like Tevye and you had your chicken coop and you went out, and I mean, probably Shoshi and Shlomo too, for that matter. We used to have chicken coops in California. But if you're raising your own chicken and you're going out to the coop, then this is something that you take a little bit more pain about to make sure that they're not fertilized. If you buy your eggs from the store, for the most part, it really isn't an issue. Crack the egg, look. If you see a blood spot, then you could feed it to your dogs or something, but you wouldn't eat it. It would not be considered kosher. And it's just a 2-second glance at your eggs as you're making your whatever you're using the egg for. Stored and shipped at a lower temperatures, preventing the method from being able to be implemented. Can you be certain that the egg received is not fertilized? Yeah, essentially you go to the store, buy your eggs, you're not going to have the issue. If you raise your own eggs, then there is some technical ways that you can do that. But if there's no blood spot, then it's not fertilized. As Susan just said, the common practice is to crack an egg in a separate bowl, examine it for a blood spot, and then use or discard it or feed it to your pets. Because we also don't like to waste food either. But if you don't have any animals to feed it to, then I suppose you would just discard it. Stephen Suzuki, Susan, that was an answer that I was... Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were coming across. Thank you then, Susan, for making that a little bit more clear. Yeah, basically, you're going to make an omelet. You crack the eggs. You look at it in the bowl. You see if there's a red spot. If there's not, you whip it up, make your omelet, or put it in the skillet, make your fried egg, whatever you're using the egg for. If there is, then you don't eat it. But again, it does happen. It happened here actually not that long ago. But it is very rare that you're going to find a fertilized egg if you're buying your eggs through a grocery store. And as everybody probably knows, there's no comparison to fresh eggs from the hen to the eggs that you buy in the grocery store. And there is no comparison between getting your milk from a cow and getting it out of a carton. Fresh cow milk, fresh goat milk is just worlds better than any dairy that you're going to find. Let's see here. So thank you, Susan, for clarifying that for Stephen and really for everybody, because it is an important issue with kashrut. Muhammad says you can call me Muhammad. Yeah, I'm okay either way. I'd be happy to call you M. Kamel or whatever you want to call you. I just realized I kept calling you Muhammad because that's how I got to know you. And if you changed your name because you didn't want me to use that, I needed to know that. But we all know we have no issues with that here. I have, like I told you before, I have Muslim friends, and you're leaving Islam or whatever your process is, none of my business. But you are a friend of the Jews. You are a friend of the Noah Hadim. You may be moving towards becoming a Noah Hadim. Maybe you already are a Noah Hadim. I don't know. But I know you're a good person. So I will call you Muhammad then. And if that's an issue, let me know, and I can start calling you M or whatever you want. Susan Connor says, happy we figured that out, Stephen. Absolutely. Sometimes, and this, by the way, is an important thing to understand. If you're having a personal conversation with somebody, you can make a statement, and by the way that you smile or don't smile or squint your eyes or don't squint your eyes or make a hand gesture or don't make a hand gesture, it's obvious. It elucidates the point that you're making with the words. But in text, you don't have that. So in text, you will sometimes say things that were intended as just being a cute statement that might really be offensive to somebody, or you will say something that you think is really clear, but someone else doesn't understand it. There's a principle that I was taught in university that said that it is not the job of the reader to understand the author. It is the job of the author to write in such a way that the reader understands. Of course, then the reader can go deeper and deeper and deeper. But the one who speaks is responsible for speaking in a way that people can understand. We have people who use these huge words because they think it makes them sound intelligent, but people don't know what the heck they're talking about. They're not demonstrating their intelligence. They're demonstrating that they're not very good at communications. We want to speak in ways that people can understand. And so if I say something that you don't understand, please let me know that you didn't understand it. Because it means not that you are whatever. It means that I didn't present it correctly. I didn't present it clearly enough. So please always let us know, whoever, if you don't understand something. We are trying here to be clear. And since we're human beings, we sometimes fail. Guy says, okay, since we're off topic, well, there's not a topic to be off of, so it's pretty much open game within reason. Since we are off topic, however, the four angels around Hashem's throne, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael. Too much to get into here. I'll maybe shoot it to you. Well, that's not a complete question, but yeah, that is the normal understanding. But remember that the Torah, in fact, harmonious with what I just said, in Torah, Hashem knows that we don't really understand a whole heck of a lot. Can't really conceive a lot in the terms of what is actual reality. And so symbolic language is used in ways to help us understand. These four angels and others do exist. They do hold their power. The carvings and the depictions and stuff are understood in those types of terms. But yeah, send me a question on that if you'd like to do that, Guy. Men, I'm not Jewish. I can't wear one, but Noahides should not wear kippot for the purpose of looking Jewish. This type of a kippah is only worn by Jews and Catholic popes and bishops. They stole it from us. But these are Jewish. This one is not Jewish. This one is Middle Eastern. You will find this type of hat worn in India, in Dharamsala, in Tibet, among the Sephardic Jews. So I guess technically from that perspective, Jews can wear this also. But these types of hats, as well as the standard Bukhari, like this one that I have been wearing a lot recently, or this one that I've been wearing a lot recently, these are Bukhari, so these are Jewish. The ones that Shlomo is making, to my understanding, are more like these Bukharis. A lot of it really is going to be up to your intention. There's nothing wrong with Noahides wearing hats. Noahides should not wear hats for the purpose of looking Jewish. That's the big thing. It is a lot. So much of this stuff goes to intention. If you like hats, and I would definitely say do not wear the standard Orthodox kippah like this. I would not do not wear this kind of kippah. But something like a Bukhari, I don't necessarily know that that would really be an issue because it's as much of an Eastern hat as it is an Eastern Jewish hat. Now, if it has embroideries of Stars of David and that kind of stuff, then obviously you wouldn't want to wear those. But basically the thing is, Noahides should not look as though they're trying to look like Jews. That Noahides are not trying to present themselves as though they were Jews. If they wish to be Jews, they should convert. But hat styles, I have, well, it's in my hat collection over here, but I've got one of my favorite hats is very similar to what traditionally is referred to as an English driving hat. If you saw that hat, you would think it's an English driving hat because it really looks just the same. You'll also find it's very common among Sephardic Jews. And you'll also find that many Sephardic Jews prefer to wear baseball caps. Seriously, a lot of Sephardic Jews wear baseball caps. The command is, for Jews, the command is that we keep our heads covered. The cultural differences between these types of kippot or these kinds of hats or Bukharis or what have you, as much as anything, frankly, they're cultural creations and elements. The kippah was made specifically, the standard kippah was made specifically to look like the hats worn by the temple priest. But I don't necessarily say you can't do that. That'd be my thought. So, for example, can a Gentile or a Noahide wear a Star of David? Yes. If you support Israel, you can wear a Star of David. That's not restricted to Jews. Can a Noahide wear a cross? The answer clearly is no. Can a Noahide wear a cross that is there to symbolize the four directions, which is what it actually meant for the pagans originally, but not the cross of you-know-who? The answer is no, because someone seeing that would think that it is the cross of the church. So a Noahide would not be allowed to wear that. By wearing a Mogen David, there is no statement, I am a Jew, because we have no halakha to wear a Mogen David. It is generally understood that a person wearing a Mogen David is making a statement that they support Israel. So a Mogen David we find to wear for a Noahide. So a lot of these things that we were discussing and we'll be discussing next Thursday in the Noahide group is that you're looking at the question of appearances and what people will assume. Same reason why you can't have chicken with dairy, even though you'll never find a chicken that you can milk, God forbid. Science, who knows, maybe they'll come up with one. But it might appear that way. So you want to make sure that your appearance is not claiming to be something that you are not. Otherwise, you pretty much are okay, except for certain items like tefillin and tzitzit and whatnot that are specifically restricted for the Jew. Stephen says, sorry, I also draw the connection of why eggs are okay with dairy, not just eggs with chicken. Should have been more clear. Well, no, it's the same. It's the same idea though, because eggs that can be eaten by us are simply food for chickens. They're not baby chickens because we don't eat fertilized eggs. If a person were to eat a fertilized egg, I assume that they should not eat it with dairy, because once conception happens, the creature is present, which is why we don't eat fertilized eggs, which is why you cannot have an abortion after conception, despite what some Jews are currently claiming. Fertilization matters. Conception is when life begins. As long as the egg has not been fertilized, there is no animal, there is no life present, and so there's no violation of dairy with eating the eggs of the animal. Essentially, eggs are intended for two purposes. One, to incubate the baby, and two, to provide food for the baby while it's incubating. So a non-fertilized egg is not a baby bird, and therefore, halakhically speaking, can be eaten with milk. No worries, no problems at all. Fertilized eggs should not be eaten by those who are observing kashrut. Muhammad says, speaking about angels, I've heard somewhere that angels don't enter where... That's a tough one, Muhammad. I do know that what you're talking about. This did not start with Islam, what I'm fixing to say, but Islam took it and ran with it. There are beliefs in many ancient cultures, including many ancient English, pre-Christian English cultures, some pre-Christian Eastern European cultures and the like, that dogs and cats are both evil by their nature. Within Islam, in fact, it's sort of like what Ahuva was reading in the book. Some people say cats are dirty. I say dogs are dirty. Islam developed an understanding that said that all dogs are filthy creatures except for one breed. What's the name of that breed? Salukis. Salukis are considered to be sacred dogs, and Muslims are permitted to have a sacred Saluki. The Saluki can live in the homes of Muslims, and however Muslims wish to deal with the Saluki. All other dogs are considered to be essentially demons incarnate. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but depending on the Muslim sect, not by that much. So that being the case, the barking of the dog would chase off the angels, and that's the reason for that. We don't have that in Judaism. In fact, in Judaism, the only animal in the Bible, in our Hebrew scriptures, that is specifically blessed by God is the dog. The dog is specifically blessed because as the Jews were getting ready to flee Egypt, not a single dog barked or whimpered, lest the Jews be discovered by the Egyptians prematurely. So Islam, other than the Saluki, dogs are pretty much cursed beasts. Within Judaism, all dogs, including Saluki, are considered to be, in a sense, blessed, but don't go too far with that, but are considered to be fit companions for human beings. Rabbi Nachman ben Chaim, who is the founder of the House of Seven Beggars, where I'm the associate rabbi, and who is the overseer of really all of my groups, but very specifically agreed to be the overseer of the Noahide group. Before I got involved with the House of Seven Beggars, I'm told, because this was before my time with the synagogue, but Shlomo and some of Shoshi and some of the other ones here remember this. I'm told that Rabbi used to have a dog that almost psychically knew when it was time for Shabbat, just like my dogs know when it's 5 o'clock. They come up and tell us it's time to feed me. They know when it's 5 o'clock. It's the most amazing thing. Rabbi A's dogs knew when it was time for his Sabbath services. And it's one dog, and apparently it would go, and maybe Shoshi can clarify if I've got this sort of wrong, but the dog would actually go into the shul and would lay down there at a nice, respectful distance, but near the Hakal, near the Ark, and would be there on the broadcast of the House of Seven Beggars. Again, this was before I joined in. But this is what you're saying is coming from a Muslim law and also a fairly common Middle Eastern perspective, but it is one that Judaism flatly rejects. We have no issues with dogs or cats. I'm a dog person. I'm a cat person. I like cats. Ahuva's allergic to cats, so we don't have any cats. But we did in California. We had one outdoor cat that sort of came with the house, and when we left, it stayed with the house. But that's a good point, and it is one that we do not observe as Jews. Shoshi says, we check for the bullseye for fertilization and also check for blood spots. Some blood spots are caused by a hiccup in the hen's egg production system. Did not know that. Shoshi and Shlomo operate a farm up in Canada, which one of these days I really want to get up there and visit. So they know all this stuff way beyond what I do. I know what I've read in the Holocaust explaining it, but they've got hands-on practical experience. Donald agrees with me, nothing is as good as fresh cow juice. I've lived on a number of communes over the years, and many of these communes had herds of cattle. And whenever I would go to one, I always asked to be assigned to the cows. It's a lot of schmucky work, but I love the cows. And there's just, believe me, there's nothing in the world like getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning for your prayers, and then spending the morning in prayer, and then going into the guest hall or however the place is set up, and sitting down at a table with fresh food with fresh milk. It is just, and going to sleep at night with a nice warm cup of cow juice, as Donald calls milk. What you buy in the grocery store cannot touch fresh milk, cow or goat. Donald says, Rabbi's signal has dropped a few times. This is something you're experiencing on Facebook. I know that YouTube is better. One thing I've noticed, I haven't seen anything this morning, but one thing I have noticed is that just before it does that, sometimes I get a notice from my OBS software saying that OBS has experienced a problem. I don't understand why they would, because they should be just going through the direct feed. Maybe it's OBS. I don't know. Perhaps we should look at another operating system, although OBS, as far as I've ever found, is always rated as the highest for these there is. I think the fact simply is that the internet is not as stable as it might be. We have a good connection here where we live at. Facebook obviously has, YouTube, well, Facebook too, obviously has good connection portals. OBS is the best software you can buy for doing what I'm doing, I'm told. So I don't know beyond that. All I can tell you is sorry about that. It happens. Those of you, if you do happen to get cut off, try to refresh the page and come back in. If we haven't been cut off, that should hook you back up. So she says, Donald, I think the issues are being caused by severe weather affecting servers and internet providers. We've been having various issues. I think that's a lot of it. I said when winter first began, we are now entering into the period of the year when we have issues, and we're pretty much smack dab in the middle of it right now. Compared to the negative connection problems we were having in California, man, we're broadcasting out of Gan Eden. I mean, these issues have really been nothing by comparison. But I think Shoshi rather is right. I think it is just about the weather patterns here. We're really overcast today, and that sort of thing, and these clouds have got to have some impact. So I don't know. We're doing the best we can. Donald's. So I can't do anything about that. So, it jumped down again. So Susan says that unfertilized eggs are considered parve and can be eaten with either meat or dairy. It's a great source of protein, right? I've heard now. I'm not a nutritionist. But I've heard that fertilized eggs are supposed to have something that unfertilized don't as far as health benefits. But Jews are advised to focus on kashrut rather than on what the AMA or whoever says. So we would not eat fertilized eggs even if that were the case or is the case. It might be the case. I don't know. As Noahide, Stephen, you are permitted to eat fertilized eggs if you'd like. The kashrut laws are optional for Noahides. Noahides need to understand, however, that they are not commanded. This is what the part of the blow-up we had the other day was concerning. Noahides are absolutely permitted to observe all aspects of kashrut, the laws, the kosher laws. However, for them, they're optional. And so the Noahide has to bear in mind, maybe as an example, I'm not going to eat fertilized eggs by my choice, not by commandment. Noahides can eat fertilized eggs if they wish, up to the Noahadim. Jews are forbidden from eating fertilized, and to the degree that the Jew chooses to practice the laws of kashrut, and very few people completely practice everything. That's their decision, but the kashrut is that we do not eat fertilized eggs. Guy says, I hate even wearing clothes with emblems on them. Funny stuff, hunting or drag racing, I do, but you catch what I mean. Wear my Jeep hat in the winter, my ball cap in the summer, and old hillbilly. Well, it totally matter what you want to look like. Shlomo Silverman says that he is a Platovich because he loves wearing plaid, and if I lived in Canada, I might too. But we're not the fashion police here. We had a discussion the other day on our fireside chat. I knew the answer, but I raised it because I had not heard Rabbi A directly address it, and I wanted him to directly address it when I asked about, I think the way I asked it was whether or not we had a standard tallit that would represent the House of Seven Beggars. And everybody, including Rabbi A, noted that we do not. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov was not happy with the uniform appearance of some of the Hasidic groups of his generation, of his time. We were in Israel talking with a local Israeli friend of ours sitting at the hotel, or actually in the plaza above the hotel. And she noted that as people were walking down to the hotel, the black hats, the really proper looking ones, as they're walking down to the hotel, she would tell me, this person's from this group, this person's from this group, this person's from that group, that person's. And I said, how can you tell? They all look the same. And she said, no, and I knew the ones with the long payas, I could maybe draw some conclusion, but Chabad is Hasidic, and they have real short payas. But no, she was looking at their socks primarily. Their socks. If the socks are pulled up over the pants, it means certain things. If the socks have this design, it means something. If it has that design, it means something. If the socks are under, it means something. I mean, it's amazing how, I don't want to use the word, but almost militarized the appearance has come of some Jews. As Breslovers, we don't do that. And the House of Seven Beggars is not specifically Breslov itself. It is traditional Judaism. However, Rabbi A and I and most of us are Breslovers. Reb Nosson, who was the second in command, who was the lead apostle, for lack of a better word, of Rabbi Nachman, he did speak on it more directly than Rabbi Nachman did. And his advice was that if you live in a community that has a certain custom, it's good to agree with that custom. So if you are a member of a shul where they all wear these kind of kippahs, wear these kind of kippahs. If you're in a community that wears burkaris, wear burkari. If you are at a place where everybody wears all sorts of kippahs, pick your choice. Follow the local minhag because you don't want to stand out apart from your community. But that's really the only statement we have about appearance. We don't have to wear white shirts. We don't have to wear a black vest. We don't have to have long payas. We don't have to have, well, technically, you should, your payas, if you're male, should be at least some length, but there's no specific law. You don't have to have a beard. Yeah, there's halakha about it. I think men are supposed to have beards if they can. But we don't. But as the House of Seven Beggars, we don't have a strict rule about that either. You decide your appearance, your dress, your beard, your payas, your hair length. You decide that's between you and Hashem. And even more so for the Noahadim, there are no dress codes. There are no dress laws. So dress however you want to dress. Muhammad says, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I have 2 cute beagle dogs. Beagles are cute. I like beagles. My only real issue with little dogs, I don't like yappy dogs, and I don't like the dogs that will slink around behind you and then come up and bite you. Ahuva and I were debating between moving here or moving to Daytona, and we decided here. But we were staying at a friend's house in Daytona for, I think we were there for almost a month. And they had these little chihuahuas. And they were just the sweetest little chihuahuas. I always think of chihuahuas as being mean, snappy dogs. These were sweet. You'd sit down on the couch, and they just come and just fly up into your lap and just sort of lay there. And just sweet as could be. And we were leaving the house after they knew us. And Ahuva is reaching for the doorknob, and this little yappy dog comes up and bites her in the back of her leg. I don't like dogs that do that. I trust big dogs more, which is funny, Ahuva thinks, because of my Shoah memories. You'd think I would prefer little dogs instead of the big dogs like I encountered in the Shoah. I don't. I trust big dogs much more. I think because big dogs are self-aware enough to know they could hurt you if they wanted to, so they don't need to. Little dogs, I think, are always afraid of being stepped on, so they've got to prove it. It's like the people who are bullied in school usually are not the ones who are the biggest, strongest. It's the ones who are smaller or weaker or something like that. But anyway, I do like your kind of dogs though. There, Muhammad. Beagles are sweet. They all look like Snoopy. Donald says, my signal is dropping. Again, Donald, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry. We'll see you later. God bless you. Shoshi says, mine's really jumping a lot. There we go. Shoshi said the dog would lay down under the table near Rabbi A's feet and stay quiet through the entire broadcast. No one knew that she was there until the rabbi told us. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure exactly what the story was. I thought it was on camera. But because I asked Rabbi when I'm doing my classes, do I need to put them in another room? Because periodically they jump up here to say hi. And he said, no, of course not. Dogs are cool. Thank you, Shoshi. I wasn't quite sure about that part of the conversation. With minor problems, we ever are thankful to Hashem to have the internet. Absolutely. And just as a general statement, if there's a problem with our volume and you can't hear us or you can't see us or my picture is bad or whatever, that please do tell me. There's really nothing I can do about the internet connections. So if you're having issues like Donald is right now, there's really no point in telling us except to just say the connection problem here is too bad. I'm going to sign off. We'll talk to you next time. I can't do anything about the internet, so there's really no point in us talking about it. Shoshi says, Baruch Hashem, indeed, Susan, to what? About the internet, right, for sure. Windows XP come back. Windows XP come back. XP drawing a comparison to the cowboy movie Shane. All right, I'm missing some of that one, Guy. I think you're saying that you don't like the new Windows, and I think most of us agree with you. Every time Windows, or pretty much everybody else, including Facebook, or I haven't really experienced it with YouTube, but usually whenever these tech giants do updates, they mess things up for a while. I keep waiting for some of Windows issues to be fixed because Windows is still having issues. Stephen says, your local rabbi is your authority on kashrut and everything else. Follow his instruction and example. Yes, but I do have to add a caveat there, Susan. My local rabbi is not my expert on anything. If you are, and I don't mean that like it may have just sounded, what a person should do, in fact, if I could retract the statement, I would have, because that was far more harsh than I intended it to be. My apologies. Pretend you didn't hear that. Let's start over with my reply. Everyone should have a rabbi that they consider to be their principal rabbi. That might be your local rabbi. That might be a rabbi on the internet. If you discover that Rabbi A is speaking truth to you and that he blesses you and you accept him as your primary guide spiritually, religiously, then Rabbi A would be your rabbi. Rabbi A is my rabbi, not any of the three local rabbis. Rabbi A is my rabbi. One of the rabbis here is Reform, says enough. We are members of the conservative synagogue. I respect the rabbi here at the conservative synagogue a lot, but not as my rabbi. And then there's a Chabad here that because of issues I have no association with anymore. I tried my best, but could not establish a connection with. rather than local rabbi, Susan, I would say your chosen rabbi. Rabbi A did a piece that's on his website, and I'm pretty sure it's in his section of learnamunah.com as well, the section on Rancall, where it's called something like, "Is my father's rabbi my rabbi?" Not necessarily. It is best for Jews and for Noahites both to take stock of who they are, and where they wish to go. Then check out the rabbis that you have access to, that you have a connection with, and determine, this rabbi is my primary rabbi. In my case, Rabbi A is without question my primary rabbi. I know a lot of rabbis. I study with a lot of rabbis. I listen to a lot of rabbis. I have deep respect for a lot of rabbis. But Rabbi A is my Rebbe. He's my rabbi. When selecting a rabbi, in my personal opinion, and I don't think the halakha will have any question with this, in the age of the internet, physical proximity is not necessarily the issue. When selecting a rabbi, find a rabbi that overall you think is doing it right. You may have some issues, but overall you think this rabbi is doing it right. This rabbi challenges me enough to where I keep trying to better myself. My observance level, my practice, my consciousness. I feel like this rabbi is leading me forward upon my path. This rabbi is willing to accept my questions and give me answers. This rabbi is respectful to me. This rabbi is one that I can support. Let that be your rabbi. Then find other rabbis, if you wish, who can add to your knowledge and your learning. But do not simply say, this rabbi is local, therefore I accept him. There are many local rabbis a person, frankly, should not accept. The newest local rabbi here, when he became rabbi on Tisha B'Av, held a Meet the Rabbi party on Tisha B'Av, one of the 2 or 3 most important fast days we have. And I went down to meet the new rabbi in town. And there were tables set up with shrimp and with little pork sausages and with cheese and with any number of things. A, it's a fast day, a vitally important fast day. B, meat and dairy were not separated. C, treif was on the same table. Not my rabbi. So I really would encourage everybody to find a rabbi. The Pirkei Avot says, get for yourself a rabbi, make for yourself a friend. Or actually, it's make for yourself a rabbi, find for yourself a friend. The rabbi does not need to be your buddy. In fact, probably a good idea not to become too chummy with the rabbi. Because if you do, you'll begin to see all the warts and wrinkles of the rabbi. Gurdjieff said, the famous Russian philosopher said, the best way to become an atheist is to make a priest your friend. All rabbis are human beings. So keep your rabbi a little bit aloof so that you can focus on what is being taught and not so that you start seeing some of the foibles of his own daily life, because we're all humans. But your rabbi should be a person that you do consider a friend, that you feel that you can go to when you're having problems, when you're depressed, when you're afraid, when you have any manner of concerns. Your rabbi should be someone that you feel comfortable going to and that you know is there for you and that will accept and will try to assist you in any way that he possibly can. Add to this, if you are Orthodox or Sephardic and you are wishing to observe a very solidly established tradition, your rabbi should be a male. I'm sorry. But female rabbis, even though they're becoming far more common among non-Orthodox, it is clearly a violation of Halakha to have a female rabbi. So your rabbi should be knowledgeable. He should have all those traits, which most rabbis are going to have, or they wouldn't be rabbis. But they need to be able to convey the information in a way that you can understand. They need to be able to demonstrate a personal empathy for you as a person. They need to be there for you. And they need to be inspiring you. They need to be challenging you to be moving forward, but not so far that you feel like you're failing because you can't meet the expectations. It's a difficult choice. After I got to know Rabbi A quite well, and by the way, we don't chum around like me and Donald do. I mean, I know Rabbi A, we talk periodically, but pretty much we talk when we have something to talk about. He and I really don't chum around, and that's frankly how I prefer it. I think it's healthier that way in a general statement. But after checking him out, and I did, and after asking him a lot of questions about his views on things, one day I called him and I said, Rabbi, I would like to request something of you. Would you consider being my rabbi, my Rebbe? And he surprised me, as he's wont to do. Rabbi said, absolutely, on one condition. On the condition that if you ever feel that another rabbi would be more suitable for your growth, you will go to that rabbi. At that moment, any remaining doubts I had that Rebbe was my rabbi was gone. Because that too should be the attitude of the rabbi. The rabbi should want what is best for you. As you go through school, your kindergarten teacher might have been awesome, but now you need a high school teacher. Now you need a college teacher. Now you need a postdoctorate teacher or whatever. The rabbi should be someone who is honestly, excuse me, your rabbi should honestly be somebody who is honestly looking out for your best interest, whatever that means. Not necessarily your local rabbi. The age of the internet, as Shoshi or Susan was saying earlier, thank God, the internet has changed everything. Thank God for the internet. Has changed this as well. Back in the day, your local rabbi and your local congregation was pretty much what you had going. Today we are able to find a rabbi that fits us individually more personably. Rabbi is in Flint, Michigan. I'm down here on the Georgia line by Chattanooga. It's quite a drive up there. We made it once. We're going to make it again. But I can't see him all the time. I can't go to a physical shul with him all the time. Doesn't matter. He's my Rebbe. So find the rabbi that works best for you. Guy says, question is, what does no socks mean? No socks means that I'm your Rebbe. No, I'm kidding. I never wear socks. I hate socks. I'm kidding. Ahuva gets on me about that. If I'm really dressing up nicely, I'll wear socks, obviously. But typically speaking, I don't wear socks. I'm not wearing shoes right now. I don't like socks or shoes. I'm a Georgia boy, I guess, from years past. But that's a good question, though, Guy. It's also funny because I've heard stories. I haven't seen this firsthand, but I do know that if different styles of kippahs for some people mean something. If you wear a velvet kippah and you meet a person who is wearing a crocheted kippah, that means that you are enemies, not literally. But the kippahs have really specific meanings too, and there are people who will say, "Oh, you're not as sincere as I am because you're not wearing a satin kippah or whatever." The whole thing is just absolutely mashugana. It's about consciousness. It's not about dress. They're really funny stuff. Shoshi says, I am a Sephardic Jewish farmer. I wear what I need to be comfortable and to take care of farming things, and that shows is precisely what you need to be doing. As your wonderful husband said, be a Pladovitcher if plaid works for you. Jeans and T-shirts are my usual clothing. I typically dress more or less like I am now when I'm out of the house. I don't always, well, in fact, right now I'm not. I don't usually wear white shirts. Sometimes I do. I just bought a new vest, which you'll be seeing me in probably on Wednesday. It is, I think it's a beautiful maroon color. I love this vest. I was going to pick up another one like this. excuse me, I was going to pick up another one like this at the store, at the men's store on Friday, and I was just looking around, and it's a customized tailor shop. And so I tell him what I want, and he goes upstairs, and he gets what he thinks I like. And I was going to get one more or less like this, but I wanted a little bit more brown than black. And he's got this one. Now, you're probably not going to like this one, but I thought I'd bring it anyway, and I fell in love. I wouldn't want a whole suit this color. But, man, this vest is beautiful. You'll be seeing it probably on Wednesday. I'm going to go tomorrow and pick it up, Bezrat Hashem. But there are no rules. If I'm out in the yard, I'm usually wearing like what do you call those pants? I have these baggy cargo pants I wear a lot. And I wear a lot of t-shirts when I'm not too bloated, to be honest with you. I'm losing my weight. Yay, weight's going away. I don't really focus too much about what I wear other than the fact that when I'm in public, as a rabbi, as someone with payas and a beard and stuff, I certainly don't want to look slovenly, lest I bring disrespect to Hashem and his name. But around the house, I don't even always wear kippah around the house. Sometimes I do. Usually I do, I think. Sometimes I don't wear a kippah when I'm at the house. But we don't have a dress code, and thank God for that. And both rabbi as well as people who jumped on the answer, I thought it was sort of funny. I mean, everybody was like, no! I like the confirmation. We don't have a uniform. Stephen says, I do. I ask here because I am at home doing the study without my rabbi present, and I respect Rabbi Shlomo's opinions. Thank you for that, Stephen. I appreciate it. We just have to figure out what's going to work best for us. Unlike certain other religions, we don't have a mediator between God and man. We don't need a Jesus or a Muhammad to stand between us and God. Even Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't stand before us and God. Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah, and we acknowledge the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest of all prophets who had ever lived, ever will live. We honor Moshe Rabbeinu greatly. We honor Rabbi Nachman of Breslov greatly. We honor Lubavitcher Rebbe greatly. We honor the Nicholsburg Rebbe, all these Rebbes. Awesome, awesome, awesome people. But none of them are mediators between us and God. We thank them for what they teach us. We learn what they have for us. And then we go and we learn something else somewhere else. If you have someone that you feel comfortable with as being your rabbi, that's a good thing according to our tradition. But avoid Rebbe worship like the plague. Like the plague. Rebbe worship will destroy your spiritual life. There are people who are so deeply committed to their Rebbe worship that they honestly don't even consider other Jews to be Jews, because those Jews don't accept their Rebbe to the degree that they do. Most of you will know who I'm talking about, one particular group, but it's not just them. It is common throughout even non-Hasidic branches of Judaism. The Rebbe, even if it is a totally person who's like 99.9% in living in Devachut, attachment to God, a true saint, even such Rebbes are human beings, fallible human beings. When Rabbi Nachman of Breslov was preparing to leave the body, his disciples gathered around him in prayer, begging Hashem to not take him, to heal him, to let them have their Rebbe for longer. Although by that point, Reb Nosson is clear that they all knew that he was on his way out. And Rabbi Nachman, very, very weak from his disease, lifted up his hand saying, stop. Quit praising me. Right now, I'm just a man suffering with the disease, preparing myself to meet my God. One of the most humble statements by any religious leader in the history of this planet, in my opinion. We're all fallible people. None of us have any room, including these great sages, to stand between us and Hashem. In the end, it's between you and God. If this rabbi helps you, Yasher Koach. Go with that rabbi. If this rabbi helps you, Yasher Koach. It is between you and Hashem. Halakha dictates that you find a rabbi and you find a friend. Hasidus could not be more clear on the importance of the Rebbe. Not Schneerson, the concept of the Rebbe. A great saintly rabbi who you can attach yourself to. Very, very important. How else are you going to learn? When the Rebbe or an advanced rabbi or even a regular rabbi prays for you, we are taught, because of the worthiness that that rabbi has merited, even if that much, the prayer of the rabbi, typically speaking, will work wonders. And we read so many stories about people going to different rabbis and literal miracles happening. So it's good to have a rabbi. It's good to attach yourself to a lineage. Our lineage goes through Rabbi A, and it's on my website. You can follow it right up to Rashi and beyond. We have a very solid lineage here. But find a rabbi that works for you. Find a rabbi that's going to help you, that's going to bless you. And you'll be a very happy person. And it's up to you who that rabbi is. Guy says, sorry if I'm disruptive. You've never been disruptive, guy. You always say that. If you were trying to be disruptive, you failed miserably at it because you've never managed it. I love your comments, guy. You've never been disruptive, not once. Happy wife is feeling better. Absolutely, amen. And I'm in an ornery mood. I got that. Shoshi Randall says, the last Windows update dropped our printer, erg. I have lots of Legion stuff to catch up on and print now. It's reconnected. Took hubby an hour to work on it. Yeah, I know. I hate these updates. I wish they would get it where it worked and we just stay there. But with all the threats that come in and all the new technologies, and I guess they can't. But I sometimes wonder if this isn't nerds' revenge. It's like the nerds are saying, okay, you made fun of us in high school. Now we're going to get you. My wonderful son who works for Microsoft, who is, by most definitions, a really effective, highly qualified nerd, assures me that that's not the case. Susan says, I was referring to the fact that he is in the conversion process and that the rabbi... Oh, I'm sorry, Susan. Yeah, I didn't get that. I forgot Stephen is in the process of converting. Yeah, I missed that part of it. You're right. Stephen should listen to his rabbi. Absolutely, 100%. He should listen to his rabbi. Stephen, if I misunderstood what Susan was talking about. Absolutely. You are in the process of conversion. Anyone who's in the process of conversion should listen to that rabbi. I was speaking of a greater generalized topic. Your rabbi who is training you in conversion is like your spiritual father. You should listen to him. And you should do what he says. And if there are other rabbis who are assisting you, Yasher Koach. If these rabbis who are assisting you disagree with your rabbi, go with your rabbi. Listen to your rabbi. He is the voice of Hashem for you during this process. Once you become Jewish, once you leave the waters of the mikveh, then you are a little bit more free. But that rabbi should always be very special in your heart. That rabbi should always be the rabbi that is your beginning. And so as a Jew. So thank you, Susan, for that clarification. I wasn't getting that. Frank or Guy says, I have 2 primaries, but listened to a couple of others here and there, but I did quit following a few because of confusion over a few things said. It really can be confusing. If you've got a rabbi who is saying, for example, that nothing is more important than the letter of Torah, observing the law, nothing is more important than that, and they are sticking to that point, that is a valid point for them to make. That is not, however, my kippah is late. It just don't seem like they stay on my head right. I don't know why. It drives me nuts when I see myself in the thing here. But if you have one of those types of rabbis who is very, very firm in their stress that nothing trumps doing Torah, period. And then you have a rabbi such as myself who says that's vitally important, but nothing is more important than emunah. Nothing is more important than the intention that you're bringing to your observance of the Torah. And this is just an example. These are somewhat two contradictory opinions. They're both correct. They're like Rabbi Shammai and Rabbi Hillel. They're both totally correct. Rabbi Shammai was 100% right. Rabbi Hillel was 100% right. But it will lead to confusion. If you are listening intently to two different perspectives. I gave the example the other day. If you're wanting to bake a cake, you may go online or open a cookbook and you may find a good recipe and you think, this sounds like a great recipe. I'm going to follow this recipe. But you know what? There's also a recipe over here. Now, this recipe says to cook the cake at 350. This one says to cook it at 400. This recipe says to use 3 eggs. This one says to use 5 eggs. Oh, here's another one. This one says to use 6 egg whites, but I take out the yolks. This egg says to use a cup of sugar. This one says to use 3 cups of sugar. How on earth are you going to make that cake? Now, once you learn how to make a cake that you like, you can say, I'd like this cake if it was a little bit sweeter. This cake's a little bit too sweet for my taste. That cake sounds good. I'm going to try it too, because now you've got this cake under your belt. The more you advance, the more you're able to take more diverse opinions in, the more that you're not going to be confused. Rambam and Rashi disagree more often than most people seem to realize. And Rambam and Rashi are both correct. If Rambam says he believes the Messiah is going to come by all the Jews making teshuvah and repenting, and Rashi says ain't going to happen, it's going to come about through Mashiach ben Yosef and the war of Magog, how are you going to reconcile those two things? Once you know more, you can see they're not at all in contradiction. There's no contradiction between the two views. But it looks like it if you simply read the text and you don't understand the depth and the background of messianic views according to Judaism and our sages. So, Stephen, a person like you who is in the process of converting, you make the cake according to the rabbi that's teaching you. Absolutely. Now, maybe another rabbi could say, you know what, that's a pretty good cake. Have you considered putting some chocolate chips on the top? Now maybe it's even going to be better. So you're going to get some other stuff from other people. But the recipe should be that which you're learning from your rabbi. I am honored if I'm able to do something that might sort of help you along your way, answer some quick question or whatever. So I'm always here for you. But yeah, absolutely. Susan, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate you clarifying that for me. Those who are in the process of converting, you listen to your rabbi. And other people on the side if you want to, but your rabbi is king. Miriam says blessings need to finish with replay, rather not, but it's what it is right now. Good week. Thank you, Miriam, if you're still here. Have a great week. Appreciate you. Susan says, I was referring to the fact that he, oh yeah, right. So thank you again for that, Susan. Guy says, I have 2 primary, I listen to that too. My screen is just jerking up and down like crazy. Muhammad says, I consider you to be my rabbi. Thank you, Muhammad. I appreciate the trust. David said he is my rabbi too, Muhammad, and thank you, David. I appreciate your trust. David also, by the way, lives here in the local area, and we are members of the same synagogue up the road. Guy says, yes, David, in agreement. Stephen says, I do not mean to imply I do not listen to my rabbi. I do, and I have yet to have Rabbi Shlomo conflict with my rabbi. My rabbi's primary source of communications outside of my shul is email, so I ask Rabbi Shlomo for a more immediate answer. It does not mean I will not bring it to my rabbi. Yeah, that would be another good thing too. By the way, if let your rabbi know other people that you're studying with. I think that's also a good idea. I don't teach things that I think violate halakha or differ from halakha, but I do have a somewhat unique perspective on certain things, and I'm sure every rabbi does. And these can also help middle things out. In fact, we had an example of this here earlier. Stephen was asking a question. I thought I'd answered it properly, but then Susan realized what he was missing, and her answer was able to fill in the blanks. We should be here for each other, which is another reason why Rabbi and I we have created a community. We are a community. And we learn from every one of you. And every one of you learn from everyone else, hopefully. And we're talking and we're sharing and we're pouring our hearts out to each other as a community, and we're becoming a stronger and stronger community of attachment to traditional Judaism. And that's really what we're going for. Like I said, Rabbi and I are Sephardic. Shlomo and Shoshi are Sephardic. Donald is Sephardic. I think David and Kat are considering themselves to be Sephardic now. But I don't care, frankly, if a person is Sephardic or not. I want us to be traditional Jews who love each other. And we can agree to disagree. Kat very kindly says that she considers me her rabbi also. Thank you, Kat. I'm honored by that. And frankly, I might add, by the way, even though your David Brown, hasn't gotten his smika yet, he's interested in joining our yeshiva once we begin accepting people. I consider David Brown to be a rabbi as far as his knowledge and his intellect and his understanding and his knowledge of Hebrew and so on. We are all here for each other. There is a necessary hierarchy in Judaism. There is. We has to be. We are rabbinic Jews. But not in the sense of putting rabbis on a pedestal. Rabbis should consider themselves to be the servants of their congregation, not their masters. Rabbis should have the humility to learn from their members. I tell you, much of what I have learned by needing to answer someone's question, because questions make me look for deeper answers. We should all be here as one people united. And when needed, we do have that rabbinic hierarchy over us, but not over us. We have that rabbinic hierarchy that exists to help us stay on the right track. If I say anything that contradicts what your rabbi says, Stephen, please let me know, because it might very well be an area that I need to look at. I don't see any reason why any rabbi would disagree with me on any of the basic kinds of things we're talking about. Now, when I say this is my opinion, that's a different matter. We all have opinions. But as far as the essentials, there's really no reason for any rabbis to disagree. Susan says to Stephen, you're doing great. Mazel tov on your decision. Absolutely, Stephen. Mazel tov. Wonderful. And Yasher Koach both. Guy says sweeter is better. Oh, that's why I got to be 300 pounds, Guy. And that's why I'm currently on this keto diet, because sweeter may be better, but bigger is not necessarily better, believe me. That's from a guy who takes diabetes. Yeah, right. Same here, Guy. Stephen says, thank you, Susan. I'm not clear on something when I type my comments. I love my rabbi along with respecting Rabbi Shlomo. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. David says, amen, Guy, me too on the meds. There are no carb sweeteners out there that even right. No, there's not. There's Halo, and Halo uses non-carb sweeteners, but the problem that we get with Halo is that other things in the ice cream has carbs, I think. I love ice cream, and I was thinking, well, at least I can have Halo because it has like almost no sugar. But I went to the store and looked at it, and it has something like 23 grams of carbs for those small containers. Oy. Kathy says, thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that. Muhammad says, I don't really understand the difference between Sephardic and others. Let me try to explain this in just a really basic sense. It's 2 o'clock. We try to keep this one about 2 hours. Essentially, we all started in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Throughout a series of events, various types of anti-Semitism, we ended up being dispersed throughout the globe. For a very, very, very long time, there was a preponderance of Jews living in Europe. They were living in Germany, in Poland, in Eastern Europe, and then moving westward towards the British Isles. Principal Jewish communities were established around the Rhine Valley and in Poland. Those Jews naturally developed certain ways of pronouncing Hebrew words and certain concepts of how various points of Halakha should be observed. Meanwhile, to their east, the Jews of Spain, Sephard is Spanish, Sephard, Spain. The Jews of Spain, and so the ones in the west, they're called Ashkenazi. The Jews of Spain and the Middle East and North Africa and up in the areas that we now call Jordan and Turkey and those areas developed other forms of speaking Hebrew, other traditional ways of dealing with certain issues like what we can eat on Pesach and so on. So you had two major branches developing. You had the Ashkenazi Jews of Europe primarily, Eastern and Western Europe, and you had the Sephardic Jews of Spain down through the Middle East. As time passed, the Jews of Europe developed a language that was a merger of Hebrew and German and Polish that was referred to as Yiddish. So most of the Jews of Europe began speaking Yiddish as their primary language. In Spain and the Middle East, in those areas, they merged their Spanish language with Hebrew, and they invented or came up with or developed, or however you want to say it, Ladino. They started speaking Ladino. These languages were impacted by either German, Polish, or Spanish. Pronunciations then became more different. So, for instance, the Ashkenazi will tell you that it is Shabbos with an S on the end. The Sephardics will say Shabbat with a T on the end. The Ashkenazis wear a tallis, prayer cloth, prayer wrap. Sephardic Jews wear a talit, prayer wrap, because the letter that one group pronounces as an S, the other group pronounces as a T. Just an example. As time goes by, people get locked into their traditions. Ashkenazi and Sephardic are not the only two, by the way. There's also a number of minor ones as well. Most of the minor ones that are in the Middle Eastern area, in much of the Eastern area beyond the Middle East, traditionally have sort of been blended in with the Sephards. The ones in Europe, for instance, there's Romana, which is a unique group that was around the city of Rome. Most of them have blended into Ashkenazi, and yet they still exist as different unique traditions. I hope that's not too difficult or too complex. But that's essentially what the difference is between Sephardic and Ashkenazi. Both sides agree that both sides 100% Jewish. Just simply a difference of tradition and culture and language. And that really is all it is. We can go into a lot more detailed about trying to figure out exactly how to do this. Now, the United States was largely settled by Ashkenazi Jews. And so the majority of American synagogues, which include European synagogues but not Mexican synagogues, the majority of the United States and Canada were Ashkenazi because that's where most of the Jews came from. But there were always Sephardic camps here and there. But for the most part, most synagogues spoke Ashkenazi in the United States and in Canada. And Yiddish was also quite popular coming over, especially in places like New York and those big hubs of Judaism. But in 1948, when Israel was established, there was a series of very lengthy debates among the Jews who were establishing the nation of Israel. For instance, should Hebrew be the national language of Israel? Some Jews said no. Ladino should be the national language of Israel, or Yiddish should be the language. The argument was, among other things, Hebrew is a holy language. Do you really want people reading a Hebrew newspaper and reading about the terrible things that happen? Besides, Hebrew is too limited to reflect all the realities of our modern, compoundedly confused world. But you can't say that the Ladino or the Yiddish is the Hebrew language, even though most Jews at the time spoke one or the other. Probably most. So a ruling was made that Hebrew would be the national language of Israel, and that the language had to be modernized to be able to convey what needed to be conveyed. And so Jews got quickly busy at that. Since Sephardi is the most common Hebrew of the Eastern world, and since Israel is in the Eastern world, the Sephardi Hebrew more or less became the standard Hebrew. But there was also a lot of Ashkenazi Jews who made Aliyah and came home to Israel. So the Hasids began blending the two. Sort of, Susan said, the Ashke Sephard. In a way, I've never heard that term, but in a way, that's what happened. Sephard sort of became a standard way of dealing with the mix. It was technically Sephardic, but it included a lot of words and concepts from the Ashkenazi. So today, if you look in a book, it will tell you that the Hebrew of Israel is a Sephardic. But it's not pure Sephardic. It is Ashkefardi. It is a blending of the two through Sephard. Again, in general terminologies. If you go to Israel, you will hear every form of Hebrew spoken that you can imagine, and many forms that won't even sound like Hebrew to you. It's all quite complicated, as are our people. In the United States and in Canada, the rabbis of local synagogues and groups like the Rabbinic Council of America decided that since Israel is the homeland of all the Jews, and since we are so divided, they would embrace Sephard as their Hebrew. In other words, most American and Canadian congregations chose to accept the Hebrew of the nation of Israel. So most American and Canadian Jews gradually were taught how to transform their Ashkenazi into the Hebrew of the nation of Israel, which we typically just call Hebrew or modern Hebrew. But that is, in real general terms, how that happened. Mexico and points south were settled by Spaniards. Now, of course, the Spanish were involved in America too, North America too. But Mexico and the country south were established by Spaniards. And so the Spaniards naturally leaned towards Sephardic. So if you go to the Rio Grande South, you will find that the vast majority of Jewish synagogues are and have always been Sephardi. So they didn't have to really change anything with the establishment of Israel. So I think that explains that. Guy says, I'm like the old Coke commercial. It's the real thing. I like it. Dude, just stay away from sweets if I can. I tell you one thing about the Coke, it is not the real thing anymore. We used to say that, Coke is it and all that. Remember, I'm dating myself, but back when I was a youngster, they came up with a product called New Coke. Most people hated New Coke. At that time, I was such a proud Georgian, I wouldn't drink a Pepsi. Coke is the Georgia drink. They came out with New Coke, and we all hated it. I remember very well a bumper sticker on the back of my car that the advertisement, I can't say that, but I can imply it. They used to have a commercial that says Coke is it. I had a bumper sticker that said Coke is something that rhymes with it that was not particularly positive about the taste of a Coke, the modern Coke. So then they came out with Coke Classic. What you have today in America as Coke is New Coke. What they did is they put New Coke upon us without admitting it because they saved a few cents per bottle by using high fructose corn syrup and the other hideous stuff that destroyed the old Coke. If you want to drink a real Coca-Cola in America, go to a store that sells Mexican Cokes, the Cokes that are imported from Mexico. That is almost what Coke used to taste like. Not quite, but real close. We quit drinking it because of this diet. I pretty much quit drinking Coke before that, all those kind of soft drinks, because when my son was diagnosed with epilepsy, thank you, Ahuva. With epilepsy, the doctor told us exactly what sodas do to your body, and I pretty much quit drinking them on the spot. Baruch Hashem, Hashem healed him of his epilepsy. He doesn't have that anymore, Baruch Hashem. But if I'm going to buy a Coke, it ain't going to be a Coke out of a machine in this country anymore. That Coke's not even fit to drink. I'm going to go to a store that sells the Mexican Cokes because that's the real Coke. So I'll throw that out there. David says, I am Cherokee by birth, Sephardi by soul. I have always been this way and always will be. Yasher Koach, David. I appreciate that. Even though, never mind. I appreciate that. That's wonderful, David. Muhammad says, thank you for explaining. Again, that was really just sort of a real generalized thing. Perhaps when we have more time, we can go into that a little bit more, or you can write me privately. I've got some links I could share with you on that as well. But it's important to understand, though, that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. So to add to that just a little bit more, the Sephardic Jews tended to be farmers. They tended to be people who herded cattle and that kind of Eastern headspace. And they had some incredibly knowledgeable philosophical people, including the author of the Shulchan Aruch. But they were largely loners people living out in the field. Not fields like Bedouin, but not living in big cities. The Ashkenazi, however, ended up living in the big cities. And as such, they got some of the things that are natural to big cities, which is being grumpy with each other, being on top of each other. And misunderstandings arose. And the French and the Germans and the Americans, but we didn't really count with regard to this, but those three countries, for the first time in history, granted Jews citizenship of their countries. We were never allowed to be citizens before. At best, we had what we would call green cards here in the United States. We were legal residents. But when Germany and France granted citizenship to the Jews, everything changed. Now we could buy land, we could own property, we could own our own businesses without having to have a Gentile be the front person for them, and so on. And so certain Ashkenazi Jews wanted to make sure that this good times continued as a way in part to keep anti-Semitism away. And so developed towards the mid-1800s what was called Haskalah, or Jewish Enlightenment. And some of these rabbis, seeking to fit in with the Gentiles and not wanting to seem weird to the Gentiles, they cut off their payas, their side locks, they changed their appearances, they stopped wearing kippahs, they stopped dressing in distinctively Jewish fashion, they shaved their beards, and so on. They brought pews into the synagogue. We'd never had those before. They brought pews and organs even into the synagogues. They put stained glass windows in with minimal Jewish iconography. so that it would just look like a regular thing. They even began for a time worshiping on Sundays instead of on Shabbat. They just wanted to be just another version of Christianity that we could go to and technically meet our requirements but not seem weird. All of this Haskalah stuff happened among the Ashkenazi. The Sephardi never did anything like that. So the Reform movement, which is the one that began it with Haskalah, the Reform movement, like the one I told you about where I went and they were serving pork to welcome the rabbi, the Reform movement, and then later the Conservative movement, and later Jewish renewal, Reconstructionism, and the other forms of non-Orthodox Judaism all arose out of Sephardic Jewry and are still considered to be Sephardic movements. We don't have movements as Sephardic Jews. Now, we do have different cultural appearances. There is a difference between Spanish Sephardim and, let's say, Turkish Sephardim or Persian Sephardim or North African Sephardim. There are uniqueness that are cultural, that are based in the cultures of the areas. But they're not really considered to be movements. It's just that if you happen to be in Spain, these cultural things are going to be more common than if you're living in North Africa, where these cultural phenomena are going to be more prevalent, as opposed to living up in wherever. We don't have movements in Sephardic. All Sephardic Jews are Sephardic Jews. According to an agreement by the chief rabbis of Ashkenazi Jewry and Sephardic Jewry, all Sephardic Jews are counted as Orthodox. Even though we don't actually have Orthodox Judaism, we only have Sephardi. But by mutual agreement and typically by practice, Sephardic Jews are all counted as Orthodox. Ashkenazi Jews are counted as either Orthodox or Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and so on. But we are all one people. When people like Hitler, may his name be blotted out of existence, and Mussolini and Duke, and I'm going to name some new ones, present people, but I'm not going to, the United Presbyterian Church, when these people wish to stamp out Jewry to destroy us, to genocide us, and the Quakers, when they work to destroy us, they don't really care what kind of a Jew you are. They don't care if you're Sephardic or Orthodox, Reform, or ultra-conservative. They don't care. They just hate us because we're Jews. But for some reason, we Jews seem to care. And so we divide ourselves and divide ourselves and divide ourselves into sects and movements and all these things. But according to the Chavetz Chaim, who's one of our greatest modern writers of blessed memory, and really all of the Jews, the reason the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE was not because the Jews were not observant. It was not because the Jews weren't doing the daily prayers. It was destroyed solely because of Jewish infighting, because each Jew was judging his fellow Jew for not doing it according to his rulings. Since the turn of the 19th century, this trend has been growing exponentially, so that today in certain Orthodox publications you will read highly regarded rabbis questioning whether or not Reformed Jews are even Jewish, whether or not they should even be considered Jewish. And you will read in papers of the conservative and reform movement whether or not certain Hasidic groups are even should be considered Jewish because they're more like cults. Chabad gets the brunt of a lot of these types of attacks. We're just way too divided. Truth of the matter is, if your mother is Jewish, or if you formally converted through a recognized Jewish Beit Din, you are Jewish. Now, the Orthodox are quite picky on the Beit Din, the court that did the conversion. If you convert through a non-Orthodox court, they don't accept you as being Jewish. And within Orthodoxy, there are some Orthodox groups that will not accept you if you converted through another Orthodox rabbi, but not our Orthodox group. It's Meshuggah. Shulchan Aruch gives us very clear rules how a person converts. Those are the conversion requirements that we follow at the House of Seven Beggars and at our yeshiva of all Jews under the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu. We observe the Shulchan Aruch on that, and we base it on individual matters, which we will be offering hopefully in the not too distant future as we're getting the yeshiva set up more properly. Let's see. So David, I read David's comment. Susan says, "Oh, gee, I thought you made up that word, Ashkafard." No, someone posted it here. I've never seen that before. It is Sephardi and it is Ashkenazi, and there is Safard. If you look, I don't have one right here, but if you look on the border on the content page of a lot of Sidurs, they will say that they are written in Sephard. That has become a common description by Sidurim for which form of Hebrew they use. They use Sephard. You will see that many places. I did not make up the word Sephard. I've never heard the word Ashkafard. But it is a blending of Ashkenazi and Sephardic, largely responsible to the desires of the Hasids, who were connected and attached to the Ashkenazi understandings of the prayers, but liked the spirit that the Sephardis brought in under the teachings of people like Rav Kaplan, who I think is the one who may have developed the term. I'm not really sure, but Sephard is now becoming more and more common. Guy says he grew up on RC Cola and moon pies. Me too, my friend. Me too. Did not drink pop, iced tea, or we drank iced tea by the gallon, and coffee, a lot of coffee. But for the kids, it was RC Colas and moon pies. And would you know, I don't think my kids have ever had an RC Cola until we were, I took them on a trip around the country while we still lived in California, and we were in the South someplace, and they were trying to find, I told them they could both buy one thing of junk food, and they couldn't decide what they wanted. I went in and bought both of them a RC Cola and a moon pie, which I think they both thoroughly enjoyed. Anyway, thank you all. God bless you all. Shoshi says, my Shlomo hollered from the basement that it was him that used it. Well, no, someone here used the term. Unless he posted, but I don't think he's posting here. Who used that term? I saw it written down here. It was right after Muhammad's question about what he was saying he didn't quite understand the difference. I don't know. Maybe I'm... Yes, Susan said, you said, Susan, I'm Ashkafard. And I think that's when I made the statement that I'd never heard of Ashkafard. Yeah, I think, Susan, I think you're the one who initially said, or Shoshi, I think it was Susan who initially used the term Ashkafard. If Shlomo said it, I wouldn't have seen it because I don't think Shlomo is typing right now. Anyway, I'd never heard the term. I'd never heard the term. But it would also be just as effective because it is the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic blending. So Ashkafard, I think, would be just as legitimate as the one that we're using now. I don't know. I don't write the language. Thank God, because I'd probably come up with some really weird stuff. Anyway, I will be happy to tip my hat and give Shlomo credit for the term. David says, me too, guy, diabetic now, shy away from moon pie. Yep, can't, no more moon pies and no more RC Colas for me. My ketogenic diet, however, is doing magic. I'm losing buku weight. Once I get down to my goal, I'm figuring every once in a while I'm going to get something sweet. But not that often. Because I'm not going to get big again. I'm sticking with this. Shoshi says, that's all right. I know he has used it previously on a broadcast. Oh, he may very well have used it before. I was just referring to this time. But like I said, he can have the credit. That's fine with me. He definitely gets the credit for being a Platovitcher. That one definitely goes to Shlomo. He is definitely our Platavitcher in residence. That's referring to Lubavitcher, by the way. So he's a Platavitcher instead of a Lubavitcher. It's cute. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I do appreciate it. Join us this evening at 6 to about 7:30, 7:45 for our fireside chat. The fireside chat is simply a time when we get together and chit-chat. Not a class, not a religious teaching, and you never know where it's going to go. Somebody brings up a topic, and we all go along with it. Sometimes it's been about we got into sports, I think, one week. I'm not a sports guy, so I was just sort of quietly listening and smiling. I don't know sports, but it can be about anything. I think the Super Bowl is coming up, right? Because I saw a sign that said that. So who knows? Maybe you guys are into sports or want to talk about Super Bowl tonight. 6 to about 7:30, 7:45. Join us tonight on Google Hangouts. If you'd like to join us for the Hangout discussion, send me a PM with your Google Hangout email address. If you want to be a member of that group, you have to have your Google Hangouts turned on. I need your Hangout and answer when I call you. If you get a call from me at about 6 o'clock tonight, about 5 till 6 tonight, and you don't want to be in the call, just don't answer the call. And please don't complain. Why did you call me? It's one call a week. Just ignore it and you'll be fine. Don't open Hangout and you won't even know you got it probably. But if you'd like to join the discussion, I need to have your Google Hangout information. If you've already been in one of our Google Hangouts, you're already in the group, so don't worry about it. If you aren't and you want to be, then send me your Google Hangout PM, your Google Hangout email address. Then from about 8 to about 10, join Veronica Port, Ahuva, Kat and David Brown, Yair, Carol St. George. This is why I hate when I start naming people, because I'm going to forget people. Kelsey Kramerich and a cast of thousands for the group meeting tonight at 8 p.m. for the All Heart Crafting group. You need to join the group for that one. In the group, you'll find the link to click up for the events. For Hangout, contact Veronica Port for that. I don't think Veronica is here. I think she has one of those meetings that she does today. But contact her or Ahuva or David or Kat or Donald or somebody for a link to join that group tonight. Veronica is here. Here we go. I didn't see you, Veronica. Here's the link to All Heart Tikkun. You can click that and join the group first. And then in the group, you'll see the setting for the Hangout chat tonight. And Veronica and everyone would love to have you there talking about all kind of fun topics as well as crafting. You do not have to be crafting anymore to be a member. Pop in, make some good friends, have a good time. Susan says, have a great rest of the day. Sweet people. Thank you, Susan Connor. God bless you. Then that takes us around to Wednesday. We have a couple of wonderful interviews coming up. I do not have anything at this point scheduled for this Wednesday, although I might. So check us out Wednesday at 12 noon for What Now with me and Donald. And then Thursday at 12 noon, join us at 12 noon Eastern Time on YouTube. You can get the link on my wall for all of these. For Learn Emunah with Reb Shlomo, we will continue discussing Der Altvig Hasidus, The Way of God, by the Ramchal. Thursday evening, 8 p.m. for the Noahide group, as we will be continuing, does this apply to me? How to study the Torah as a Noahide and other related topics as they come up. Be sure and join Rabbi Ariel Nachman Ben Chaim on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern for Story Corner with Reb Zeta. I don't think he calls him Reb Zeta. I call him that. With Zeta. Hasidic Stories by a Lion Puppet. Really, really good. Enjoyable class. They're humorous. They're fun. Sometimes they're sad and heartbreaking. They're great stories. Join Zeta, and Rabbi A usually comes too, for this class Monday at 8 p.m. on the Karuv Media Network. Veronica, if you would give us a link to the Karuv Media Network, that would be awesome. Then join Rabbi again on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. for Torah studies with Rabbi A. and Reb Ruvain. Torah studies with Rabbi A. and Reb Ruvain. Coming up, it's not for a few months, but I want to give everybody a heads up because I really want you all to be here because you're going to love it. Rabbi is going to preempt his Wednesday broadcast, and I'm going to preempt my Thursday broadcast during Pesach prior to Yom HaShoah for Shoshi Randall's to do an incredible reading of one of Rabbi A's books where Reb Zayda runs into the Holocaust issues. It is an incredible book. And we'll be giving you much more information along with links where you can buy it. Shoshi, if you happen to know the link where people could buy that book, would you share that? If you don't, that's okay. We'll get to it. But Shoshi's going to be reading the book over 2 nights. She'll read half one night and half the other night. It's going to be really awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. Remember me at learnamunah.com. If you want to learn Judaism, go to learnamunah.com and click the tab to Learn Judaism. I have now completed the first session, and we'll be beginning the second session shortly. Right now, however, I'm focusing more on trying to beef up the Noahide studies for people there as well. If you have any questions or comments, please invite me. Join Donald Willinger and all of us for kosher cooking in our kosher cooking group. One of these days, we're going to do a broadcast there, a cooking class there as well. That is in the group Kosher Cooking, which you can find. It's K-O-O-K-I, cooking with all Ks. Kosher, K-O-O-K-I-N-G, spelled with Ks, simply to make it stand apart from all of the regular spellings, because there's a lot of kosher classes. Okay, don't worry about it then, Soshi. That's fine. She says she thinks on Amazon. Don't worry about it. We have plenty of time. We'll get that link to you guys later. So I think that's about it. We have lots of groups. You're welcome to join all of them. Questions, PM me, PM Donald. We'll be happy to help you in any way that you possibly can. Remember to sign up for the Noahide newsletter that our wonderful Noahide friend Veronica publishes each month with incredible information. There's just a lot going on. We're busy now 6 days a week, 6 days with something. Every day except Tuesday, there's something being offered by the House of Seven Beggars and the Karuv Media Network. Thank you. Veronica's posted the link to Kosher Cooking as well. So check us out. If you have any questions, again, contact us. Till next time, may God bless you, may God keep you, and may God cause his face to shine evermore upon each and every one of you. We will conclude with the incredible talent of Avraham Fried singing Chazak, Chazak. God bless.
Yehuya Azayro Yochiv Yoimar Chazak Bishesre Yehuya Azayro Yochiv Yoimar Chazak Oy 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 Nashir biyachad Oy 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 Chazak Oy 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 Nashir biyachad Oy 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 Chazak 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 Denis Chazak 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 Denis Chazak Chazak Chazak, oh yo yo, the beats go yo 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 yo, Chazak, oh yo, the beats go yo 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 yo, Chazak, 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 Denis Chazak, 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 Denis Chazak, 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 oh yo yo, the beats go yo 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 yo, Chazak. We are the beats go yo 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 Chazak. Oh! Yehuya Azayro Yochiv Yoimar Chazak yehiyu yazoiru yazoiru Oli yochivi yoy mar chazak Ay 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 nashir biyachad Oy 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 chazak Ay 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 nashir biyachad Oy 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 chazak 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 V'nishchad zeik chazak 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 V'nishchad zeik chazak chazak Oy 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 Adbi azgo yelo yo 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 chazak Oy oy Adbi azgo yelo yo 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 chazak 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 V'nishchad zeik chazak 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 v'nishchad zeik chazak 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 Oy 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 Adbi azgo yelo yo 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 chazak Oy oy Adbi azgo yelo yo 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 חזק ונתחזק חזק 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 ונתחזק